Greetings, my magicians. This video is dedicated to those of you born between 12th September 1984 and the 6th of April 1986, which means you were born with your North Node in Taurus and your South Node in Scorpio, which is the nodal axis we've been traveling through since January 2022, and have reached the end of now, marking the closing out of your second nodal return, as the nodes will enter Aries and Libra on July 17th. This year. The nodal return is when the nodal axis returns to the same point as at birth, which happens every 18.5 years. This video is also dedicated to those of you born between November 1983 and November 1985, because Saturn and Pluto were in the sign of Scorpio at that time, except for a period when Pluto retrograded back into Libra. If you check your birth chart, you'll know what applies to you. So there's also a subgroup who have their South Node, Saturn, and Pluto in Scorpio, and may have either Saturn or Pluto conjunct their South Node in Scorpio. For the babies born at this time, Scorpio is a very strong energetic signature, even more so if there are personal planets in Scorpio or personal planets aspecting the nodes, Saturn, or Pluto. Given the complexity and intensity of Scorpio and the transits over the last few years, which have targeted this Taurus-Scorpio axis with great gusto, I felt it was absolutely necessary to acknowledge this formidable transformation all of you belonging to this subgeneration have been engaged in. To begin with the nodal axis briefly, this is often considered the direction of destiny, the South Node being where we've come from and the North where we're headed. This seems more linear than it actually is. We're not simply walking away from our South Node towards our North Node. There is a dynamic between both points, but there is a journey from the familiar to the unfamiliar. And it's the strengths, talents, skills, and abilities, as well as the trauma, wounding, distortion, and redundancy of your South Node that instigates, catalyzes, supports, and detracts from embodying the energies and purpose of the North Node, which is where your fulfillment lies in this life. Be clear, however, that you are not abandoning your South Node for your North Node, but cleansing it of its detrimental qualities and harnessing its power in order to best harmonize with your North Node. Now, the second nodal return that you've been experiencing begins at around the age of 37, and this is the age Carl Jung referred to as the age of individuation. The first nodal return marked the beginning of attempting to grow into adult life as we leave home for work or university, ready to meet the world with our aspirations, and often experience first loves or relationships. Almost 2 decades later, after the world has met us, we have achieved, failed, been made, been broken, created work, business, families, relationships, or not. And whatever our state of being is at this point, it is once again time for a big shift. And we're informed this time around by lived experience, not just dreams and intentions. And yet we are led to new dreams and intentions, perhaps back to old ones too, as we realize we want and need something more or other than what we've manifested so far. We begin the search for the true self, breaking through the barriers to our authentic nature, by exploring the inner world as we once did the outer world. At this time, things could be coming together, falling apart, most often both simultaneously, but it's very obvious that significant changes are underway in whatever walks of life that the nodal axis and its aspects in your chart include. The Taurus-Scorpio axis is romantic, passionate, resilient, strong, resourceful, sensual, sexual, fertile, rich, dense, intense, intimate, luxurious, and loving, and carries a deep learning of our desire nature, how we create and share our abundance, how we transmute our experiences into true power, and how we come to live in a state of serenity and beauty. It is sheer life force energy, and its purpose is to experience this energy for the sake of the energy experienced. Scorpio is perhaps the most maligned and misunderstood sign of the zodiac, and that's why I wanted to make this video. I'd like to just briefly mention that all the signs, planets, and asteroids have a longer history than the patriarchal mythology of the Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, and Vedic Hindus. What is referred to as traditional astrology dates back to around 5,000 years ago, which is around when the collective psyche shifted out of one of unity and into separation. What I mean by this, and by patriarchy, is not just about men suppressing women, but about masculine energy being split apart from feminine energy, with the intention of controlling or discarding everything that the feminine principle includes. This is the body, nature, instinct, intuition, feeling, the unseen, and the power residing in all of this. Because of this, mythology and power belonging to feminine deities is usurped, appropriated, and corrupted by masculine ones, as well as what was once considered natural and necessary for the sustenance of creation becomes undermined, villainized, taboo, and is no longer allowed to be a part of conscious life, eventually becoming the domain of the subconscious realm, from which shadows and demons spring. This is a natural consequence of suppression and wounding. When natural energies cannot be unleashed, they become distorted and harmful. Scorpio has been subjugated to this tragic treatment the most of all the signs. It is a feminine energy embodying the cycles of death and rebirth, ritual and sexual practices of healing, transformation, purification, and transmutation through intense lived experiences, and a sacred compulsion to reveal the truth. It is tremendously powerful, as it has the capacity to self-destruct in order to self-rejuvenate, to give birth to itself anew. It knows instinctively when it is time to shed the old skin and willingly lets the ego die for the purpose of union with something or someone, and revels in the intimate enmeshment with whatever has been chosen as its energetic body of interest, be it a person, creation, work, process of discovery, or healing. It extracts and harnesses all that it can from the given experience, emerges with newfound wisdom that is beneficial to all humanity, because Scorpio is always seeking an ever deeper understanding of the human condition and is never again the same being as it was before the experience. It lives to transform and be transformed. Scorpio is the alchemist. It is often associated with political and financial power, but this is in the pursuit of a lost power in a modern era which lacks channels for the natural unleashing of scorpionic power. It's not really the politics or the money that is of value. A sign that is intended for union, therefore sharing of all energetic resources, has become renowned for manipulation and deception for selfish purposes, as a consequence of its natural force being relegated to the dungeons of collective consciousness. It gets distorted into extreme self-preservation due to a crushing, yet to most people, secret fear of being disempowered, and this is where its controlling nature comes from. It can go to great lengths to control situations, relationships, and its resources because Scorpio very easily feels under threat. Vulnerability must be avoided at all costs. Scorpio is also an extremely loyal and loving sign. It loves and desires with a fierce passion and needs to be valued and cherished for what it offers, as well as being rewarded with the same loyalty. When it isn't, it feels profoundly betrayed and hurt, and as an instinctual sign can lash out very much like a wounded animal, or can attract people in situations which do the lashing out. There is a rage stored in Scorpio which needs to be acknowledged, released, and healed. In a society where intense emotions are easily judged, those who opt for a more acceptable mode of interaction and expression and hide their anger even from themselves often are on the receiving end of volatile behavior of others. As a sign which operates strongly from the subconscious, very often it is through external circumstances that a Scorpio person is awakened to their own nature, reflected through others. Scorpio likes to take things to the edge, testing itself and others just to see what responses and reactions can be squeezed out of it or a person, very often as proof of love or power. There is a deep connection felt between desire, love, and power, and it easily gets into games of either overpowering or giving away power. This again as part of its deep dive into the roots of what raw human experience embodies. Scorpio often invites painful and difficult relationships through which it transforms itself, unless it gets stuck in a repetitive pattern of toxic situations. All in all, given the extent of its subconscious content, emotional trauma and wounding, and lack of channels to express, harness, and even learn about its own power through direct contact with life force energy, Scorpio can become an open invitation to crisis-oriented living. I say it needs to learn about its own power because the alchemists, initiates of all mystery teachings, are all very Scorpio energy, and they were trained by mentors and teachers. There was due process in the steps and methods through which one embarked upon self-transformation. We lack this kind of guidance and even inclination in a world that worships industry and consumerism. It's not that everyone with a Scorpio signature wants to become such an initiate, but they all do need a rather specific type of support, healing, and loving guidance, so they can put their energy to best and most beautiful use and learn that true power can never be lost. It lies in their own being. It's just a question of releasing it properly and for loving reasons. Now, with the South Node in Scorpio, there is memory of trauma, emotionally, physically, even sexually sometimes. There is memory of crisis and of overcoming it. Memory of its infernal courage. As I heard astrologer Christopher Renstrom once describe Scorpio as having, infernal courage. There is memory of being stripped of power. There is also memory of being powerful, of being highly skilled in the arts of healing and transformation, of having a deeply intuitive and sharp, penetrative intelligence into the truth of matters and people. Memory of needing sex and engaging in sex intensely, sometimes addictively. There is memory of great loves, great fealty. It is established in past lives, or in stored memory of generations in our DNA, and in early life, in this life, that its natural energy is unwelcome, overwhelming, and must be suppressed or denied. This is why Scorpio becomes secretive of its feelings, its ideas. It works under the cover of darkness, revealing only in the end its intention or manifestation. But it can become a secret unto itself, only coming to terms with its inner reality once life compels it to through crisis. Fret not, my darlings. We have lovely Taurus on the other side. With Saturn in Scorpio, it becomes even more important to understand Scorpio thoroughly, because Saturn is the structure of our consciousness and is translated into the structures that we create or dismantle in our external life. Saturn is a social planet, so its sign determines how we contribute to society, what we take responsibility for in doing really well, and the legacy that is born from this sacred work. In Scorpio, all the experiences and wisdom one has gained is used for the transformative healing of society, through understanding where the human condition is stuck and what it needs at a deeper level to evolve. Saturn in Scorpio has the ability to create or engage with reformative processes within the context of society and community. It sees what can benefit the people and makes a concentrated, deliberate effort towards this betterment. It is stunningly strong, a mountain of support and energy for anyone who needs it, and will easily carry another through their crises. Saturn is a cold, dry planet, and in a water sign of such forceful intensity, and for the purpose of surviving the scorpionic trials and tribulations, Saturn turns all that feeling to ice. The controlling factor here is greatly emphasized. This is beneficial at younger ages when often one is subjected to abuse of authority or other forms of energetic restriction. You feel protected, you feel strong, and you get through it all. But as you get older, although physically freed from circumstances of early life, this ice can leave people unable to express themselves, especially emotionally and or sexually, or draw in people who can't. There can be a harshness with the Saturn-Scorpio experience. It can feel quite punishing. and it can turn people who have this placement harsh until they let the ice melt, and melt it must in order to embrace their beautiful Scorpio purpose. The gravity and seriousness of this position needs conscious effort in learning how to embrace levity and lightheartedness, turning powerful struggle into powerful play. If you have Saturn conjunct the South Node, all this is even more enhanced. The memories of the South Node, ancestral wounding, and a very strong attachment to past energy takes a solid effort to break free from, especially since Scorpio is a fixed sign. On the other hand, you're extraordinarily tough. You are almost unbreakable. It really is stunning to behold how you emerge whole from anything that gets thrown at you. You know that no matter how melodramatic and volatile things might seem on the outside, there is an inner sturdiness that ensures that you rise again, and it doesn't even take you all that long. This is the gift of Scorpio's innate ability to self-heal, self-rejuvenate. Saturn conjunct the South Node indicates unfinished business and a very strong attachment to the past. So there's a delicate job here. On one hand, there is life previously denied or unfulfilled and yet to be lived and lived well. That's relevant to the South Node, while simultaneously detaching from what the South Node used to mean. This can really feel like a tug of war as you move through life because your Saturn is opposing your North Node. But once you make the necessary changes to your consciousness to facilitate a smoother path towards your North Node, the power of this aspect is so strong and it can mean astounding achievement. Delayed perhaps, but not denied. In addition to all this, there's Pluto in Scorpio. Pluto is a transpersonal planet and includes a much larger generation. Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio, so this is his game. But wherever he goes, it's time for death and rebirth, time for purification and regeneration. Therefore, this generation is responsible for the transformation of the sign of Scorpio and all it embodies. To take it out of the dark, out of its distorted and toxic form, purify it of the abuse and violence wreaking havoc across the globe in the form of human trafficking, torture, black sites, sexual abuse, its manipulative and deceptive tactics when it comes to financial institutions, corporate media, politics. But since I'm focusing here on the special little Scorpio bunch, Pluto in Scorpio in addition to Saturn and or the South Node in Scorpio means even more dedication to the Scorpio cause, which really begins with the intention to release the old and welcome the new fearlessly. If you have Pluto conjunct the South Node, this is a repeated cycle. Life literally had to be done over once more to cleanse, purify, and transmute completely that which was not before. This can feel very karmic and heavy, especially in Scorpio, because there are experiences very often of undeniable abuse that have traumatized one deeply, and it can seem very difficult to break out of the pattern of reliving them. The fear of pain is lodged deeply in the soul, and it takes enough pain suffered through once again before finally realizing the time has come to end the cycle once and for all. Again, as an opposition to the North Node, there's tremendous power available in manifesting the North Node purpose, once sufficient alchemizing of past pain into loving life force has been done. And with Pluto here, you were born to alchemize. As I mentioned earlier, however, the reason Scorpio is experienced as difficult is because its nature has been distorted. If freely supported, encouraged, and released through proper channels, then the South Node, Saturn, and Pluto in Scorpio would be experienced very differently. And that's the point. This generation must ensure that future generations do experience Scorpio in its loving, sexy power, and not in the way of the past. Now for Taurus. Harmony of any sign requires its opposing sign, and for Scorpio, this is beautiful, gentle, peaceful, stable, pleasurable, sensual, lush, comfortable, abundant Taurus. Here there is no complication and convolution and crisis. There is the simplicity of indulging in natural life and the most precious capacity of enoughness. Taurus does not chase or yearn. It receives and enjoys. It builds and rests. It ensures that everything it needs is acquired, and there's no reason to worry. It's entitled to the good life and knows how to sustain one. Sex is for pleasure and procreation, and necessary to feel healthy and loved. That suffices. It's not searching and transforming. It is being and sensing. Taurus is inclined towards what feels like abundance and luxury, and surrounds itself with whatever that might mean individually. This is, of course, the perfect counterpart to Scorpio, and exactly what Scorpio needs to calm its turbulent waters, untangle its entanglements, and fulfill its hunger for more. There is this fairy tale-like theme when moving from Scorpio to Taurus, which is probably why I love it so much. Taurus and Scorpio are very magnetic signs. All energy attracts whatever frequency it resonates with, of course, but this axis in particular has great magnetic force. These two signs are instinctive, reactive, responsive, intuitive, compulsive, and indulgent. They're not all that inclined to discern whether what they're desiring or pursuing is for the highest good. That's why practicing discernment of the state of your inner and outer world is very important to ensure what you're attracting is in fact healthy and happy. When the North Node is in Taurus, or there's otherwise a strong emphasis in Scorpio, Taurus is the unfamiliar energy, the least conscious one. It takes some time and enough triggers to awaken the need for Taurus. For many of you, this may have taken until Uranus stepped into Taurus in 2018. The great reformer with his thunderbolts arrived to awaken our relationship with what resources we value in ourselves and in the external world, and to shake things up. He would have opposed your Pluto in Scorpio early on in his transit, and this could have been pretty dramatic. Relationships, finance, work, health may have imploded. Whatever axis in your chart was involved. Or you might have just been awakened on the inside with an extreme urge to break free from past cycles of experience. Either way, this likely marked a big turning point when you realized a new way of life was necessary. You were no longer willing to engage or invite extreme or dramatic circumstances. Stirrings for more stability, more abundance, more peace were felt. Uranus then conjuncted the transiting North Node in Taurus and your natal North Node for those of you in your nodal return, which is a supreme gift of breaking open the energy of this most necessary Venusian medicine. He was in this position for many months as he retrograded back and forth, giving Taurus enough time to seep into your desires, strengthening its position as your destiny. In opposition to either transit or natal South Node, there could have been abrupt and difficult endings or losses, but all for the purpose of freedom to be more. The South Node needs a good deal of flushing out. Finally, Uranus opposes your Saturn. Some of you may have that aspect in play now or ahead still, and this is phenomenal because Saturn is crystallization of energies, a hardening. And anything left to break free from, anything left to release, Uranus is here to make sure it is done. He is your liberated and blasts through to make space for a new structure of life, which begins, of course, with the structure of your consciousness. We also have had Saturn through Aquarius from March 2020 to March 2023. And so he would have squared your nodal axis if in return, and the transiting nodal axis, and your natal Saturn and Pluto, all in the span of these few years. Just one of those squares for many others would have been enough to handle. But for you power players, this was doable. Still, this would have pressed you hard to extricate yourself from Scorpio's tendencies of emotional engulfment and seriousness, and gain a higher, more expanded perspective of situations. Transiting Saturn square to natal Pluto would have been earlier in the transit, and Saturn square to natal Saturn later. Aquarius's cool and detached intelligence would have wanted to slice through the wound-oriented muck of Scorpio with its cosmic sword, and with Saturn at the helm, this may have felt surgical, inclusive of post-operate recovery. So much of the past may have been surfacing, memories, dreams, old reactions lurching forth out of nowhere, irritation, anxiety, and deep-rooted fear all swirling around in one little body and mind, all the while feeling pretty forcefully pushed out of this either through enforced circumstances or the self no longer being able to contain what it had for this long. Saturn in Aquarius squaring all your Scorpio-ness would have incited a firm decisiveness in moving into the next level, so to speak, ultimately reframing your mode of operation in regard to what you came to understand was worth applying effort for. This was a waxing square, so the gift was to clear the path of any debris that is an obstacle to the contribution you are to make. Aquarius is for the people, the collective, and transiting Saturn, squaring your natal Saturn and Pluto in Scorpio is requiring your powers of alchemy for an expansive and humanitarian purpose. This was precious knowledge. It did not come by easily. Also through 2022, there was an ongoing square between transiting Uranus and Taurus and Saturn in Aquarius, which was another situation of pressure generating even more opportunity for Taurus and authenticity to enter our consciousness. Then, as we got closer to the end of the transiting Nodal axis, since Pluto entered Aquarius, the Pluto square for this generation began, and this is a really big transit that needs its own video. Suffice to say, this only accelerated and intensified all the transformations that had already been instigated, especially because the transiting South Node conjuncted your natal Pluto at some point as well. The South Node conjuncting natal Pluto is high force karmic flushing out of all the painful rubbish, toxic patterns and addictions your Pluto has held up until that point, and is the biggest and best cleansing your chart could offer you. But before something is released, it needs to surface, and all this material may have made itself very present over the last few months and is still being worked through. So there have been multiple squares, conjunctions, and oppositions with both the transiting and natal nodal axis, Saturn and Pluto, and that is why this time has been such a glorious opportunity to make the biggest changes in your life so far. This was and is it, the great discovery of a truer self, through death of old cycles and emerging desires. Not everyone's second nodal return or everyone who's been going through the transiting axis through Taurus and Scorpio received this amazing gift of tremendous acceleration and basically this catapult into massive transformation, which is why I wanted to talk about this so it would not go unrecognized. Scorpio rules the pelvic area, the reproductive and genitourinary system, the bowels. It is needed for elimination of waste and for creation of life. There may have been physical symptoms that arose during this time, pelvic or lower back and sacral pain, menstrual or fertility issues, sexual issues, venereal issues, or problems with digestive elimination. This can easily happen when the psycho-emotional content has not yet fully been processed, healed, and released. This is all right. This is okay. It is really important to understand that any symptom, mental, emotional, or physical, is a message of love informing you of what you do not consciously know you need. It can take time to heal, and great compassion is needed, especially for Scorpio. Given the number and intensity of these transits in such a short period of time, it would be no surprise if your physical body has taken the toll, because as we've already established, you're not inclined to break down into tears or reveal to many how you really feel. Especially Saturn and Scorpio cannot abide by it. That strength is a power and a sense of self-respect that isn't relinquished easily. So perhaps your body is crying for you, expressing for you, and if so, it is time to let yourself share your soul with another. Speak of your travails. Write, paint, dance, sing your heart out, and cry, my loves, with your eyes. You have been initiated. You have crossed the threshold. You have walked through ice and fire and reached the promised land, which is you. And now for the grand finale transit, the one that is the balm for all your war wounds and the great opening to your abundance. Jupiter in Taurus from May 2023 to May 2024. This is so, so beautiful, and it really moves me. After everything that has been endured, lost, gained, healed, processed, released, Jupiter now is crossing through Taurus and opposing all those points in Scorpio, and this is phenomenal. Without a shadow of a doubt, Jupiter is here to bless and amplify the fruitfulness of your journey. In Taurus, this is the sign of what feels so, so good about being human. Richness of the earth, richness of the flesh, pure deliciousness of being. And you're ready for this now. Old patterns of pain and crises and extreme situations are being flung out the door, and now you can embody what you were always meant to, the lovely life. When Taurus and Scorpio are harmonized, it's gorgeous to behold. Taurus's tendency to place too much value on material acquisition is kept in check by Scorpio's profound understanding of the value of the inner realm and the power of unseen forces that manifest lived and sensed experience. Before Taurus can get complacent or stagnant because everything seems comfortable enough, preventing natural growth when it is in fact time to shift, Scorpio swoops in, sloughing off the old and beginning the process of renewal for more depth, more enrichment. And when Scorpio does say more, because it will, more, Taurus goes, okay, baby, we have the space, we have the resources, because Taurus took care of that. We're ready, go for it. But Taurus also knows when it's enough, when to be content, how to be content through presence. And it teaches Scorpio this crucial skill of being present. When Scorpio knows how to do this, it goes from the compulsion towards renewal, just for the sake of experiencing intensity, to focused devotion on creating and sustaining abundant life, because now you know how to enjoy it. And this is what you need to get clear on. How can you create a life that feels tantalizing and stable at the same time? What is abundance to you? And what are you willing to let go of in order to have it? What kind of work, what kind of relationships, what kind of place to live in aligns with this? Romantic and sexual relationships are really important for this axis. Regular sex, regular masturbation is necessary to feel healthy. Learning and delving into techniques that harness sexual energy for the purpose of rejuvenation and transmutation for the entire being, not just for the sake of sex, is an excellent way for Scorpio's energy to be channeled and played with. For example, Kundalini, Tantra, Taoist techniques. Engaging romantically and sexually with the intention of love and care is really important. No matter how hot, intense, or interesting one's preferences might be, the physicality has a value, and this must be honored. There is great wisdom in knowing when to emerge from the underworld, from Kali, Hecate, Ceridwen, and Hades, and when to be embraced by Queen of the Heavens, Venus, Aphrodite, Hathor, and Freya. Your dark waters, dense with the magic of minerals and nourishment that were born out of death and decay, are what the roots of Taurus drink to fill your kingdom with lavish sweetness and beauty. Nothing and no one can rob you of this sacred power. The life force that you ensure never dims. Go forth and frolic in those lush fields that could never have been without beloved, glorious Scorpio.